The day the Galactic Armada darkened Earth's skies, humanity realized the stories whispered across the stars had reached their doorstep. Vast warships blocked the sun, blotting out the sky in a display meant to intimidate. Cities paused, communications scrambled, and fear rippled through the air. Yet beneath that fear, something older stirred, a defiance written into the human condition. The voice that broke through every broadcast channel was not a negotiation, not an offer, but a demand. The Galactic General, draped in ceremonial armor and surrounded by his lieutenants, delivered his decree with the casual authority of one who had subjugated 100 worlds before. He demanded tribute, medals, resources, soldiers, and unflinching obedience. Earth was not to be a partner, but a vassal. The words rolled across the globe, translated into every human tongue, carried on alien frequencies that brooked no interruption. The general spoke as though humanity's compliance was already assured. He promised that those who obeyed would survive under the benevolent order of the Galactic Dominion, while those who resisted would be annihilated so thoroughly that their species would be remembered only as a cautionary tale. He laughed at human history, at wars fought with what he called primitive fire. His fleets, he declared, were capable of turning continents to ash in a single sweep. Most species, faced with such overwhelming might, had bent their knees. That was the pattern the general relied on: intimidate, demand, consume. But in the silence that followed his ultimatum, he sensed something unusual. Humans did not rush to appease. No emissaries of surrender stepped forward. No trembling leaders begged for mercy. Instead, a stillness lingered, a pause heavy with unspoken calculation. The alien council that observed the transmission interpreted this as hesitation born of terror. To them, it confirmed what they already believed: Earth would fold like all the rest. The general's arrogance swelled as the minutes passed without a reply. He spoke again, taunting humanity, declaring their silence as proof of weakness. He reminded them that resistance was impossible, that no race had ever stood against the Dominion and survived. He offered a final chance, one last window to comply before orbital fire would rain down. In his mind, the matter was finished. He imagined Earth's leaders already fracturing under the weight of fear, struggling to decide which sacrifices might buy them time. But humanity's quiet was not the quiet of surrender. It was the quiet before the blade is drawn. In underground bunkers, in command rooms far from public view, messages were being passed with ruthless efficiency. Old protocols long considered relics of the Cold War reawakened. Satellites reoriented, encryption networks activated, long-hidden caches of weapons brought online. Humanity had never been strangers to invasion, to empires demanding subjugation. Every century of history bore the scars of conquerors who had believed themselves unstoppable. And each scar carried with it a lesson. Among those listening to the general's decree was a figure known not by title or office, but by reputation alone. Soldiers whispered the name like an invocation: Baba Yaga. No politician, no diplomat. This was a strategist shaped by wars fought in shadows, one who understood that survival was never given but taken. Where others heard the general's laughter as mockery, Baba Yaga heard only arrogance, and arrogance was a weapon waiting to be turned. For the moment, the general could not see it. From the bridge of his colossal flagship, Earth looked fragile, a jewel waiting to be plucked. He could not imagine that a species so young in galactic terms could muster anything beyond token resistance. His officers reassured him that this was routine, that soon the tribute would flow and humanity would be integrated into the machine of conquest. Yet a trace of unease lingered. The silence did not feel like submission. It felt like something else, something he could not name. Far below, in quiet rooms lit by dim monitors, men and women studied the alien fleet with eyes that did not blink. Every orbit, every formation, every communication pulse was mapped. Data poured into simulations, weaknesses searched for with the hunger of predators. This was not the posture of prey, no matter how it looked from orbit. This was preparation, silent and deliberate. The general, impatient, declared a countdown. If no answer came, Earth would be made an example. His voice, booming across the planet, framed the choice as absolute: surrender or extinction. The words echoed in every human ear, yet no fear-laden reply followed. Instead, leaders exchanged a single understanding: humanity had been given no choice at all, and therefore, it was free to choose only one path. Baba Yaga leaned forward in the shadows, listening, waiting, calculating. The general believed he had seen the whole of humanity in that moment, that he had judged them correctly. He was wrong. Humanity was not silent because it was broken. Humanity was silent because the answer, once given, would be final, and it would not be tribute. The silence finally broke, not with pleading, but with a voice that carried no trace of fear. The transmission cut through the Dominion's broadcast as if the humans had simply decided it now belonged to them. Static gave way to a cold, measured tone that froze every officer on the general's bridge. The speaker did not introduce themselves with rank or nation, did not couch words in ceremony. Instead, the reply was sharp and precise. Humans did not pay tribute, they buried invaders. The words struck harder than any weapon, because they carried conviction rather than bravado. Across the galaxy, the broadcast carried into council chambers and war rooms. Expectation had been for surrender, perhaps defiance shouted in desperation, but this was something different. The figure who spoke identified themselves only with a name that made even other humans shift uncomfortably: Baba Yaga. For outsiders it was meaningless, but for those who knew the myths, it carried the weight of inevitable retribution. The general sneered when he heard it, dismissing the reference as primitive superstition, yet the unease that had lingered in his chest deepened. Baba Yaga's words did not end with the refusal. They became a litany of history, spoken not with pride but with brutal precision. Empires had marched across Earth, demanding gold, demanding submission, demanding that humanity forget its own identity. Every one of those empires had been broken. Sometimes quickly, sometimes only after centuries of blood, but broken all the same. The message was clear: Earth's story was resistance, and those who thought themselves masters eventually became dust. The speaker's tone remained calm, almost detached, yet each sentence landed like a knife pushed into the ribs of arrogance. The general laughed outwardly, though the sound was strained. He mocked the audacity, called it the last bark of a cornered animal. Still, he noticed the sidelong glances of his lieutenants. Doubt was contagious, and once seated, it spread. To steady them, he announced that Earth's defiance would be punished swiftly, that cities would burn so others would understand the price of insolence. But even as he spoke, he realized he had not silenced the echo of that human voice. On Earth, the effect of Baba Yaga's reply was immediate. Populations who had felt the weight of dread lift from their throats now inhaled something sharper: resolve. The refusal unified fractured states in a way no treaty or alliance ever had. Factories redoubled their work, militaries synchronized in ways previously thought impossible, and scientists pushed projects that had been theory into reality overnight. The general's demand for tribute had not cowed humanity, it had given it focus. The silence before had not been indecision, it had been consensus forming in the dark. Baba Yaga reappeared only once more in that transmission, the words colder this time: tribute would not be given, but a promise would. The Dominion would learn what it meant to hunt a species that had risen by clawing its way through every trial set before it. There would be no negotiation, no middle ground. The line was drawn with finality. The broadcast ended, leaving the alien fleet staring at the void left behind by that unwavering defiance. The general snarled, ordering preparations for bombardment, yet even in his rage he could not ignore the pulse of unease running through his command. For decades he had waged wars on worlds that begged for leniency, that offered surrender before the first strike. None had dared to make threats. None had spoken as though death was not something to fear, but something to deliver. On the council worlds that monitored the confrontation, whispers spread faster than official reports. Some saw madness in humanity's stance, but others saw danger, the kind of danger that did not bend even when outmatched. The Dominion thrived on predictability, on species choosing survival over pride. Yet this reply showed humanity valued something else entirely, something that could not be bought or threatened away. For Baba Yaga, the general's arrogance had already revealed his weakness. Threats meant nothing when survival instinct overruled judgment. His fleet, however vast, would be forced to act predictably, punish first, intimidate second, consolidate third. That predictability was the opening. Humanity would not fight on terms chosen for them, they would dictate the rhythm from the first exchange. In the hours that followed, alien intelligence services recorded unusual spikes in encrypted transmissions across Earth. They noted it, dismissed it as disorganized panic, but in truth it was mobilization at a speed no Dominion strategist had anticipated. Factories that had lain dormant sprang to life, underground facilities shifted into wartime posture, and a species that had fought each other endlessly turned its focus outward in unison. The refusal was more than defiance. It was the signal to awaken the war machine hidden beneath centuries of apparent division. The general, still smiling outwardly, told his officers that humanity's reply was nothing but noise before execution. Yet inside, he felt the weight of a truth he could not speak aloud. He had demanded tribute and been given a promise instead, a promise that no matter how many ships hovered above Earth, the humans would answer in only one language: death. When the Dominion prepared to unleash fire upon Earth, they expected panic and pleading. Instead, their opening move dissolved into chaos before the first order could be executed. The moment targeting systems aligned, ships within the general's fleet began tearing themselves apart. Missiles veered from intended courses and buried themselves into friendly hulls. Plasma cannons overheated, discharging at random, crippling vessels that had not even engaged. For a stunned heartbeat, the bridge of the flagship believed sabotage had come from within. Then realization struck: the systems had been compromised. Human operators, working through pathways no Dominion engineer believed penetrable, had slipped into the fleet's networks. Their code was not elegant, but it was merciless, spreading like wildfire. Navigation panels displayed false coordinates, sensor feeds looped false readings, and ships fired blindly into empty space. The general roared, demanding answers, but his officers had none. They had never faced an enemy who turned their own strength against them. Even as the fleet tried to stabilize, reports arrived of smaller ships disappearing. Boarding alarms screamed across multiple vessels, though scanners showed no approach. What the Dominion failed to comprehend was that humans had found ways to move unseen, exploiting blind spots and forgotten access points. Entire squads vanished in silence, their absence marked only by the eerie stillness left behind. Later, when reinforcements entered compromised decks, they found nothing but corridors lined with bodies positioned deliberately, mocking displays of precision slaughter. Fear spread faster than the sabotage. Soldiers who had never lost a battle whispered about shadows moving in the corners of their eyes. They found comrades with throats cut, weapons untouched at their sides, as if death itself had stalked them. A name began circulating among them, whispered in tones of dread: Baba Yaga. It no longer mattered whether they understood the myth, they felt it. Something was hunting them that did not fight by rules they recognized. The general ordered his fleet to regroup and concentrate fire, but when the formations tightened, more ships detonated. Explosives placed with impossible accuracy bloomed from within their own hulls. The Dominion had always fought wars of overwhelming superiority, never accounting for an adversary who thrived in asymmetry. Humanity did not clash head-on. It struck where arrogance left gaps, and the fleet was riddled with them. Across the galaxy, intercepted transmissions began to spread. Footage of Dominion ships exploding under mysterious circumstances leaked to neutral worlds, accompanied by grainy images of alien soldiers staring in horror at messages scrawled in blood. "We warned you! Tribute is death!" These images traveled faster than official reports, planting seeds of terror in species who had already known only submission. Suddenly, whispers of human defiance transformed into something larger, the idea that the Dominion could bleed. The general tried to regain control, assuring his officers that these were isolated incidents, yet each assurance was undermined by another explosion, another squad vanishing, another ship falling silent. His voice, once booming with certainty, now cracked as he shouted commands that went unanswered. He could no longer ignore the truth. He was being outmaneuvered by a species he had dismissed as unworthy of serious thought. On Earth, Those monitoring the operation watched the destruction unfold with grim satisfaction. Every move had been calculated to sow panic rather than maximize immediate damage. This was the first lesson: fear would do more to weaken the Dominion than firepower alone. Humanity wanted the general to understand that control had already slipped from his grasp, that his enemy was not cowering beneath his guns but clawing into his heart from within. The first squadron collapsed entirely, reduced to wreckage scattered across orbit. Survivors screamed for extraction, but no rescue came. Those still afloat realized they were now isolated, uncertain if their systems would obey them or betray them at any second. They hesitated to fire, fearing their own weapons more than the humans they had come to subjugate. By the time the general demanded a full retreat to re-establish order, his authority had been fractured. Soldiers who once followed without question now flinched at every shadow. Officers carried out orders reluctantly, knowing compliance might lead to their deaths. The image of Dominion invincibility cracked in those hours, and the sound of that fracture was carried across the galaxy. For the humans, this was not victory but opening movement. The first strike was not meant to annihilate the fleet outright but to pierce its pride and flood it with doubt. And it succeeded completely. The Dominion had demanded tribute, but instead, their soldiers had given screams, their ships had given wreckage, and their reputation had given way to fear. The general, for the first time in his career, felt the cold weight of an enemy he could not understand, and he knew instinctively that worse was still to come. The Dominion had expected a quick correction after their fleet's stumble, but what followed was not recovery. It was collapse spreading in slow, merciless waves. The humans, emboldened by the first disruption, shifted seamlessly from infiltration to open counterstrike. Where the general thought he had time to reorganize, humanity denied him that luxury. Communications between his fleets fractured further, entire relays falling silent as sabotage expanded beyond orbit. What began as technical disruption evolved into strangulation, supply convoys disappeared into void, listening posts erupted in fire, and outlying bases simply stopped transmitting. The Dominion's reach, once absolute, felt suddenly brittle. Human operatives did not fight to hold ground, they fought to unbalance. On remote stations, they struck like phantoms, leaving installations ablaze before slipping away without trace. Captured Dominion soldiers described horrors more psychological than physical. One squadron reported seizing a human alive, only to face eerie calm during interrogation. The captive smiled as if welcoming death, uttering only a single phrase before detonating hidden explosives that erased both himself and his captors. "Baba Yaga is coming." That message traveled faster than the blast, infecting even hardened veterans with dread. The general tried to rally morale by claiming these were isolated losses, but his words rang hollow. Soldiers whispered in their bunks, glancing at shadows as if they concealed knives. Even elite units, conditioned for unflinching loyalty, faltered under the creeping terror. The Dominion had never faced an enemy who treated death as a weapon rather than a price. When the humans escalated again, they unveiled weapons adapted from stolen technology. Railguns, primitive in appearance, fired with precision that tore Dominion armor apart. Missiles carried new guidance systems, striking targets once considered unreachable. Each weapon was a declaration: not only could humans fight, they could learn faster than anyone had calculated. Every wrecked vessel was stripped for components, every scrap of data analyzed, every captured device bent into service. What the Dominion intended as superiority became raw material for their enemy's evolution. The general, once arrogant, now raged with desperation. He demanded reinforcements, but the Galactic Council hesitated. Reports of defeat and sabotage made them question whether pouring more resources into Earth would invite catastrophe rather than conquest. Whispers of withdrawal began in corners of power where fear outweighed loyalty. For the first time, the Dominion's unity showed cracks. Humanity exploited those cracks ruthlessly. They broadcast Dominion defeats across neutral networks, images of burning warships and abandoned stations looped with the same chilling declaration: tribute denied. Blood returned. Species who had watched the Dominion enslave worlds without resistance now saw a different story unfold. For them, humanity became more than defiance, it became possibility. If one species could resist, perhaps others could too. The Dominion's fear was no longer just of humans, but of rebellion spreading like wildfire through the galaxy. Meanwhile, the general's own fleets bled strength with every passing day. He ordered increased patrols, only to see them vanish. He commanded overwhelming assaults, only for them to collapse into chaos when human strikes landed at the precise moment of weakness. The realization gnawed at him. His enemy did not waste effort. Every move was calculated, every strike designed to wound deeper than the last. He was being dissected slowly, his authority shredded piece by piece until only the shell remained. And still, Baba Yaga's voice returned, cutting into Dominion channels with chilling precision. Calm, steady, devoid of any plea, the words were simple. You asked for tribute. We pay in corpses. That phrase echoed across the fleet, impossible to erase, etched into the minds of soldiers already fraying under the weight of unseen hunters. The Dominion had ruled through fear for centuries, but now that weapon was turned against them. They had always believed overwhelming numbers and firepower could drown resistance, yet they found themselves fighting ghosts who never stood still long enough to be crushed. Each attempt to respond left them weaker, each retaliation spiraled into another failure. The general's power, once unquestioned, now looked fragile even to his own officers. He saw doubt in their eyes, and in that doubt lay the first taste of mutiny. For humanity, the counter-strike was not only war, it was message. They were no longer prey clawing for survival. They were predators teaching a lesson carved in fire and blood. The Dominion's arrogance had demanded tribute, but humanity offered instead an education. To invade Earth was to awaken a force that would not stop until its enemies were broken beyond recognition. The general clung to the belief that his strength could still impose order, but beneath him, soldiers whispered of inevitability. Baba Yaga had promised vengeance, and promise by promise, strike by strike, humanity was delivering. The Dominion had underestimated them, and now the galaxy watched as that mistake was carved into history with every shattered fleet. The general gathered the remnants of his armada for a final strike, convinced that one decisive blow would restore order. His ships limped into formation, hulls scarred, crews shaken, but discipline forced them forward. He aimed everything at Earth, determined to make it an example that would silence whispers of rebellion across the galaxy. Yet when the fleet arrived, the planet below remained untouched, serene beneath its atmosphere, while orbit appeared eerily vacant. No opposition met them, no defenses fired. For a moment, he believed victory might yet be salvaged. Then the trap closed. From the blackness surrounding them, human vessels emerged, smaller, fewer in number, but positioned with mathematical precision. Cloak signatures dropped, revealing lines of warships bristling with weapons scavenged and perfected from Dominion wreckage. Railguns hummed, missile bays opened, and the fleet that had come to crush humanity found itself encircled, its own formations reduced to prey. Baba Yaga's voice filled every channel, calm and merciless. This is the price of arrogance. The words were not shouted but carried with such weight that even seasoned officers faltered. Then the attack began. Human fire tore into Dominion hulls with surgical accuracy, rupturing reactors, igniting chain reactions that spread like wildfire. Ships that had survived countless campaigns vanished in bursts of flame, their destruction accompanied by silence on the human side, no triumph, no taunt, only execution. Panic spread through the Dominion's ranks. Commanders issued contradictory orders, some demanding retreat, others urging all-out assault. The chaos only made them easier targets. Every attempt to reorganize was anticipated. Every maneuver collapsed under precision strikes that seemed to know where they would move before they themselves decided. It was not a battle. It was eradication carried out with cold intent. The general's flagship shook under the onslaught as systems failed one by one. Alarms screamed, corridors filled with smoke, and soldiers who once marched with unshakable confidence now scrambled in terror. The ship was boarded with a swiftness that made resistance meaningless. Teams of humans cut through defenses like blades through paper, moving with the same eerie calm that had haunted the fleet since the first strike. The general's guards died where they stood, their bodies left in silence as the intruders pressed forward. When the doors to his command chamber fell, the general finally faced the enemy he had mocked. Baba Yaga stood before him, expression unreadable, weapon steady. The room froze in the weight of that moment. The general, stripped of his armies, of his pride, resorted to begging, offering resources, alliances, promises of withdrawal. His voice, once a roar that carried across systems, cracked into desperation. Baba Yaga's reply was as sharp as the edge of a blade. "We do not forgive invaders. We erase them." The words sealed his fate. The execution was immediate, the shot echoing like judgment itself. Cameras captured the act, the Dominion's supreme commander collapsing in a pool of silence, his death broadcast across the networks humanity had long since hijacked. There was no doubt left. Earth had not only resisted, it had destroyed the one who demanded its submission. The surviving fragments of the fleet broke apart, scattering into the void, but none escaped the shadow of fear that now followed them. The galaxy watched, stunned, as the Dominion's symbol of strength was reduced to wreckage. For the first time in generations, the myth of invincibility shattered. Neutral worlds that had lived under the Dominion's shadow now whispered humanity's name with a mixture of awe and dread. Where once they had been dismissed as primitives, they were now spoken of as predators cloaked in human skin. For Earth, the victory was not celebrated with parades. It was marked with grim acknowledgement. Humanity understood what it had unleashed, its reputation no longer one of fragility, but of ruthlessness. The lesson had been delivered in fire, one that would echo in the minds of every species, demand tribute from humans, and the only payment returned would be war. The Dominion, fractured and humiliated, would remember. Future generals would think twice before turning their gaze toward Earth. Parents across distant systems would use a new warning to silence their children. Beware the humans, for when they rise to kill. And in the shadows of history, Baba Yaga's name transformed from whispered myth to living legend, proof that when pushed to the brink, humanity would never kneel, it would destroy.